I'm woken from a desolate slumber by a caress of heat. My limbs feel like useless leaden replicas. I find myself on a sunken leather couch with my neck cranked at an impossible angle. How long have I been here? Somebody's lodged a pillow beneath me for support, but it's gotten stuffed into the crevice between the cushion and the armrest. There's no pain until I try to move. I force myself into a seated position. Jesus, I'm in rough shape. My head throbs, pangs in the ribs with every breath. Must have bruised or broken a few. I can barely see out of my left eye except for a repeating fractal that would be kind of fun if I knew for sure that it would eventually return to normal. Where the hell am I? There's an impressive stone fireplace across from me with an array of nautical devices lining the mantel. A couple of them look like sextants, and there are a few compasses, but I don't recognize what the rest could have been used for. They're definitely artifacts from another age, crafted with precision and built to last. None of this slapped together with plastic might last a couple of months bullshit we get nowadays. 9 or 10 ships and bottles of various sizes sit side by side as well, and a huge wooden helm inlaid with mother of pearl hangs above. All around the room are shelves and shelves of books. Mold mingles with the smoke and tickles the nostrils. I remember sitting on deck with Claire, the storm, Antonin and his goons, my poor ukulele, Claire getting away. She did get away, I remember that much. The beating that followed is clear enough. Antonin's chain is still intertwined between my fingers. There was an Aquarius pendant on it. I'm an Aquarius. February 10th. Hard to believe we both could have read the same horoscope this morning. It would almost be ironic if I believed any of that crap to begin with. Just goes to show, doesn't matter what month you're born in, if chance wants to fuck with you, there's not a damn thing you can do about it. The nearest window reveals a night sky with cloud-like patches of mute green luminescence. There's an unsettling sense of motion that occasionally brushes against my awareness, a subtle shifting sway. Soon I find that it's barely noticeable. A gentleman in his mid-60s appears in the doorway beside the hearth. He strolls in with the air of a lifelong member of the upper crust. He's wearing a 3-piece suit complete with celluloid collar and cuffs, shiny two-tone brogues, and a watch chain that flashes from his vest front. His thinning gray hair reflects the firelight with every movement of his head. "You've been unconscious for quite some time now," he says. "I was beginning to worry. Not all new arrivals make it through the ingestion process. It can be quite traumatic. And by the looks of it, you were a little worse for wear to begin with." Let's just say I tried to be a hero at the wrong time in the wrong place with the wrong psychos, I say, rubbing my jaw, which makes a cracking sound now when I open and close it. "Did you say ingestion process?" I ask. Disregarding my question, the man smiles apologetically and extends his hand, which I give a limp shake. "I'm afraid we so rarely receive visitors my manners escape me. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Edward Heatherton III. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance." "Patrick K. Nice to meet you too, Ed." "Edward," he says, and adjusts his cuffs, which, though scrupulously maintained, appear worn at the edges upon closer inspection. "You did say ingestion process, didn't you?" "Yes, well, I guess you could say you've been chosen. All kinds of people have found their way in here. It's just that it seems to prefer the altruistic types. Perhaps we're tastier. Who can guess how it thinks?" I nod. Can this be anything but a dream? A hallucination? Complete divorce from reality? Digging my knuckle into my thighs does nothing, so I decide to play along. I have to wake up sometime. So, Edward, how did you find yourself here? He takes a seat in a cracked leather armchair, pours himself a glass of reddish-brown liqueur, takes a long sip and fixes his eyes into the distance. Though it's obviously painful for him, he seems to have told the story many times. I was 64 years old, living with my wife Lucille in London, he begins. My holdings were in order and nearly running themselves, and my son was overseeing more and more of the details on my behalf. I'd always wanted to visit New York, so I decided to take a few months off and booked us a journey on the famous Lusitania. What a ship! She was the fastest to cross the Atlantic in her time. Well, the trip passed quickly, as most voyages at leisure do. We took in the sights of New York with all the appropriate awe afforded to its scale and grandeur, and soon it was time to return to England. I remember the day clearly, May the 1st, 1915. There were rumors everywhere about German U-boat activity in the waters off the British Isles, but the captain personally dismissed the claims as overblown hysteria. I had my doubts, but I decided to take him at his word. It was a rather pleasant cruise home. I had luck at the poker tables, made the acquaintance of a few notable gentlemen, and imbibed my fair share of spirits, he says with a twinkle in his eye. Lucille was prone to seasickness and spent much of her time convalescing in our cabin. Poor creature, she couldn't keep a thing down for most of the trip, not even the broth I spooned out for her. We observed strict lights out and noise measures to avoid being too easy a target, but our luck had run out. Here he stops to gather himself. All color has left his face. Just as I'm about to tell him he doesn't need to continue, he does. On the 7th, in the early afternoon, just off the coast of Ireland, we were hit. There were 2 explosions, and we very quickly began to list towards starboard. It was horrific. Chaos in the worst sense of the word. All the protocol, the procedures, the order, the very essence of our humanity vanished into utter anarchy. Needless to say, getting women and children to safety was a priority. With so many terrified passengers and crew trampling over each other to escape, I was unable to descend the passages to our cabin to get to Lucille, so I stayed on deck to help and hoped Lucille would find me. We managed just a couple of successful launches. Many of the lifeboats flipped and spilled their passengers into the ocean below. Some of them crashed onto us from above. A few brutes out of their minds with cowardly desperation tried to board one of the launches, elbowing women and children out of their way. I wouldn't stand for it, so I found myself grappling with them, and eventually they were able to throw me overboard. That's terrible, Edward. The water was shockingly cold. As I sank below the surface, death in its seductive way wrapped its tendrils around me, bound my limbs, pulled me deeper. People plunged in all around me. I could hear their muffled wails of despair. At this point, there wasn't a thing I could do to be sure my Lucille was safe. Not a thing. The water entered my lungs like knives of ice, yet after the first few breaths, a mysterious warmth had melted them away. All was black and calm. I surrendered myself to it. I was prepared to see it through. But lo and behold, I awoke on the same leather couch you sit on now, with a sore neck and the same bottomless sack of questions. I realized I'd been moved by Edward's account, the dramatic pauses, the quivering tears that never quite spilled from his eyes. Nothing seemed false or forced. Yet, if my calculations are correct, and it takes me a bit of figuring to finally come to an answer, Edward Heatherton III is now roughly 156 years old. He looks damn good considering.